concerned to understand what will be our strategic intent, because we recognize that if we are to craft either a feasibility plan, a business plan, or a marketing plan, that we would have to have a sense of self from a strategic standpoint, which is important to understanding our our way to pivot the venture that we are proposing, and therefore that in going through certain exercises that represent or allow us to build that strategic intent, that we can articulate that strategic intent, that we would be clear that we are appropriately matching to our venture, and that we are shaping and harnessing our venture in a way that we can successfully achieve it. By extension, it is important that we do not do these deliberations in a vacuum, meaning to say that we only think of self strategically and think of venture strategically without recognizing that all of this is located in a particular context. And so today, our second and final toolkit for this semester takes us through what we call diagnostic assessment, as you would see it referred to on the course outline, or situational analysis, which is essentially giving you tools that you can understand that environment, that context in which your strategic self and the venture you're proposing is likely to operate in. It makes no sense to do the first phase, let us say, if we want to call it that, or the first two stages, which would be arriving at a strong venture, defining our strategic intent, and then wanting to go and develop a business plan or a feasibility plan or a strategic marketing plan, without having a clear sense of the environmental context in which you will be operating. And so this is what we will focus on today. We will look at some of the worksheets, some of the exercises, the strategic tools that we use to help us to arrive at these considerations. Right? Let me make sure. Right. So as I said to you before, a diagnostic assessment is really another way of saying situational assessment. And this is what we use to give a context to the environment in which the venture operates. Just one moment, please, class. Yes, class. Right? So this is what we use to give context to the environment in which the venture and you as the creative entrepreneur will be operating in. And we also do the diagnostic assessment as an active tool of navigation. Imagine your diagnostic assessment like Waze or Google Maps, right? Because when you can do an environmental scan, it would allow you to see what are the pitfalls and where opportunities may lie. And what I sometimes even like to say, what are the oases? We know what is an oasis, not so?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yes, and we know that an oasis is where you're looking in the desert, and it may look as though there's water there, And then we have what is called
It
what?
might look like
Mirage?
it's dry, but then the
Yeah,
oasis is
yeah.
where life is.
There you go. Exactly. So that one can see the diagnostic assessment in a similar way as well. It is an active navigator for you. And then by extension, if it is a navigator for you, if you do it well, it will allow you to see what are the opportunities, what are the advantages, both inside and out, internal, external, as well as the challenges that may need addressing. So this is a very critical exercise to engage in, regardless of the plan that you may be seeking to embark on. And the reason why I teach it like this is because I have found personally as a consultant, the fact that I can do this quickly in my mind almost as a mental map is what helps me as well to determine sometimes what may be the best approach that can be taken in light of whatever may be the plan or the document that has to be designed. It is not a case where you do this to then decide. And the reason for that is that the document has to match the business and the stage, or the venture, sorry, and the stage the venture is at. And it's from there now, one then situates that, looks into the external environment and the internal environment to read it, then to scan, to see what is existing there that can throw you down, which would be the challenges, and what is existing there that you can take full advantage of, which are the opportunities. Everybody understands that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yes.
right. So the y'all are hearing me clearly? Am I warbly or am I coming through loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
It's up clear,
Loud
Right.
and clear.
clear for me.
Right. So
Irie.
the first thing or the first part of this diagnostic assessment is to look inwardly. And sometimes, depending on the document, this may not be the first thing that you put down when you do the environmental scan. It depends on the template you're following or what has been asked of you. But I personally find if one is doing it for the first time, or one of the first times, one of the first few occasions, that it's useful for you to come here at looking at strengths and weaknesses, which are the internalities, after having developed your strategic intent, because you're already looking inwardly. And so, therefore, you are in a position now to continue to look inwardly to do your first strategic scan now, right? So, this is not done in any willy nilly way, but there's a particular way in which we approach it. And the reason why we approach it in a particular way is because we want to be very clear in our mind as to what it is we can do well, or what it is we do well, as well as what we do poorly or what we are likely to do poorly. And when we say that, we are looking not only at resources in the specific sense of physical resources or financial resources, but we are also looking at competences, which is where your human capacity falls. And then, of course, we said areas of relative disadvantage, which will be borne out on one particular aspect of this scan, as you will see shortly. So, this is the reason why we want to pay attention to doing an internal scan. Now, let me tell you how you know what is internal. The factors that you will contemplate are things that you have control over. It's internal. And internal meaning what is within your realm of control. What is within your venture if it is already existing. And even if it's not existing, we know it's a startup. So in other words, what are you starting up with? That's why we use that term startup. So, what are the resources that you have at your disposal that would allow you to start up? And what are the resources that you need that you don't have that are necessary for the startup? And those are the considerations that are needed in, of course, doing this internal scan, which is identifying strengths and weaknesses. Any questions so far before we go into the way we actually do it? Any questions or comments? Okay, I take it as everybody's good. So the tool that we use to do that is called a resource audit. How many of you have heard of the term resource audit?
Never heard it.
True. Who say never heard
And
it?
I heard
Almal, I never heard that before.
Olemal. How is that possible? I taught you economics of culture. You all didn't do that?
I can't remember. I've
I
never heard this.
I can't remember. I don't know. Hillary, you know about resource audit? No. Well, maybe I didn't teach it. That sounds strange though. But anyway, okay, no problem. Anyone else heard the term the resource audit? Anyone else? No? Okay, well,
I heard it before.
right. Okay, great. So a resource audit is just as the term suggests, is an audit of your resources. It's like a checklist. Okay, and what you basically try to do with the resource audit is to try to identify your strengths, meaning to say what resources you have, as in you own, and what resources you have at your disposal. So you may not have the competence of being a strategist, but maybe Dr. Tal is your godmother and she promised you that she could do it for you for free. So you have access to that resource. So in a resource audit, that would be considered a strength, even though you yourself are not a strategist. You see? At the same time, the resource audit is a balanced exercise. So it also wants to know of your weaknesses. And so if it is that Tal is not your godmother, you don't even know Dr. Tal, you hardly know her, and you know no other strategist, but you need a strategist, and you are not a strategist, then that falls on the side of the resource audit as a weakness. In other words, that is a resource that you need to have that you don't own nor do you have access to. Does everybody understand in general how it works in principle?
Yep,
Yes.
yes.
Right. And so the way how you determine have or have access to vis-a-vis don't have access to, you give consideration to quantity because sometimes you might need a lot of something like capital. You give consideration to quality. So maybe you know a strategist, but maybe they're in grad school and they never see a star pitch, as we would say in Barbados, vis-a-vis a Dr. Tull or a Gregory Maguire or a Dr. Keith Nurse or a Dr. Hickling Gordon and so on, as well as the extent to which the resource may be unique. Well, I don't know. You may be operating. So, for example, if you look at some of the projects you're doing, you are you are building the ventures around indigenous resources that are unique to Trinidad and Tobago, or in some instances unique to the Caribbean. So that in of itself is a strength. You see? So the resource audit makes those decisions about have have access to vis-a-vis don't have access to, according to these three main, what I like to call, criteria: quantity, quality, and the extent to which the thing is unique. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Great. The other important element of building a resource audit is that to help you to wade through all of what may be before you in terms of your internalities is that you can categorize your resources. And for this, we go to financial management and accounting. So these are things you should have met these categories with Miss Joseph. Physical resources, which is, for example, what? Can somebody give me an example of a physical resource?
Warehouse or location.
Great. Human resource. So, for example, what? In the context of our business, of what we do, the business of creativity.
Seamstresses for the costumes.
There you go. Yes, an artist, singer. Financial resources, which we know will be money, anything to do with money, insurance policies, and all that, anything that goes along the finance line. And intangibles, does anybody know what encompasses the intangibles?
The social resource, like your network and who you know and whatnot.
That's one. What else? What else falls in intangibles in our world?
What materials that you have,
Sorry?
like equipment and stuff.
Yes, equipment and stuff like that, correct?
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say? Sorry, I didn't hear that, Hillary.
Equipments and materials that you may have.
No, that is physical.
Okay.
That is physical, right? What it would be, for example, would be things like goodwill, your intellectual property, right? So
And your
that
relationships, no?
and your relationships. Yes, Janelle mentioned networking. Yes, so all of that falls there. Correct. You see? All of that falls there. So your resource audit allows for you to categorize these resources so that you would end up with a comprehensive list. This is what allows you that when you do your resource audit that you can be thorough. It's not a case where you might put down 3 things. If you have all these categories, then it stands to reason that you should be able to come up with a comprehensive list of what you have and what you don't have. It's like a shopping list almost. And then the last thing, when you have categorized, one can do a final exercise to help rank these things by looking at whether or not the resource that you have gives you competitive superiority. In other words, in having this particular resource or access to this resource, does it give you some advantage over others in the industry? Is it that you have a resource that is scarce, which would be a good thing, and you have direct access to it, right? Is it that your resource is something that can't be imitated easily, right? Is it safe from that? Can your resource be substituted? So for example, cinemas are open, yes, but watch Netflix and be safe, right? Can your resource be easily appropriated? So for which I think one of the projects experienced that, which is why somebody made a shift. So can what you are looking at as the focus of your venture, can somebody else take it and use it in another way, or take it and use it in a similar way but in a different context for the same audience? Is your resource durable? Can it last and outlast? And then I believe I mentioned substitutability. So these are some of the contemplations that one would make when one is giving consideration to ranking then in your resource audit in terms of identifying not just what you have and what you have access to, but also being able to identify those resources that are critical to your competitiveness, and identifying those resources that you don't have that would be critical to your competitiveness. Can anybody tell me why they think that would be important to do? Why would it be important to be able to not just do the resource audit, but to also be able to say which ones give you a competitive edge that you have and which ones give you a that you don't have? Why would that be an important thing to do in your strategic planning and doing that diagnostic?
Because it's part of your SWOT analysis. Is you figuring out your strength and your weakness at the same time.
Okay, that's the technical answer. Can I get a strategic philosophical answer? Like why that important to do as a businessman, as a creative entrepreneur? Why you need to do that?
Because it sets you
So
apart from the competition if you understand where you fit in the large scenario in your arena.
Correct. And that is what ties back in nicely with what Jaron is saying, because if you can have a sense of that even before you start to map out the feasibility plan or the business plan or the strategic marketing plan, it means that you're already setting up yourself to have an advantage over others. You see what I'm saying? That means that you are building this document knowing full well where your edges, where your strengths, where your competitive edge lies. Everybody understands that? And it means, therefore, that you are building it looking in the direction of strategies that will help you to take full advantage of those resources that you have that allow you to have that competitive edge. Everybody understands that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Right. Okay. All you have to answer. Try and stay focused, please. Okay. So let us turn then to that first worksheet. Let me see if I don't know if I could pull up mine. Let me try. Look for the worksheet on the resource audit. And I just want to go through it just to show you how it's done. I wouldn't ask you to do it today, but I will ask you to work through these exercises. And of course, I would want for you to, let's see, next class. Yes, I would be happy to receive them next class. I would like to see what you come up with. So I'm just going to pull this down for a moment and pull up the, let me see if I could get it in the, is everybody seeing theirs? Have you pulled up yours?
We're still seeing these
We
slides.
still see the resource audit.
All right. Let's see if I can get it to. As usual, it's not allowing me to pull it up. Can Jaron do me the honors and share screen, please?
I can't today, Dr. Tull. I'm on my phone today.
Oh, yes, it's
I'm
true.
in
Can somebody else share screen for me, please, and pull up the resource audit worksheet?
Sure, I can do it.
Yes, because then for me to do that, I would have to come out, which of course I don't want to do.
Is it seen?
Yes. Okay, I'm requesting control. Let me see if it will allow me.
Gave it.
Not moving yet. Okay, you might have to do it for me, but that's okay. Right, so you would see, just as I explained, the worksheet lays out the 4 broad categories. And we have ourselves, now this is like rough working, but the beauty with these worksheets is that when you are building whatever plan, you can just use these. When you do your rough working and you've come to a determination of your final determination as to what your resource audit is, you basically tidy up your worksheet, and you can use this as a diagram in your document just as it is here and indicate whatever you need to. And of course, you always keep it neat and tidy, so it should not be a case where you see human and physical here and then financial and intangibles on the next page, but you basically print this page as many times as you need to and however it fits. So if you have three 3 human that fit here, but you still have other human, you put them on another page. So it's always a neat, tidy matrix or grid that you see. Okay, so they said this resource type is human. Can somebody use, let us use their, we'll use everybody's as much as we can. So can somebody suggest their project and let's try using that for the human?
Okay, so the cosplay story camp. So for the human resource, we have the ones I have access to. It'll be the seamstresses and the delivery service personnel. What I'm thinking about. And
Right.
and teachers who will be working along with me. So other instructors at the camp.
Right. And then your expertise is what?
Drama.
Right. So that is the expertise that is owned by you. So all of that would come here. Do
Okay.
not own, do not have access to.
Okay, do not own, not have access to. Let's see. What do I not own and don't have access to in terms of human?
Yes, a lawyer. You
Well,
have a lawyer?
right. I don't have a lawyer. Right. That's a good one. I don't have a lawyer. I don't have an accountant yet.
Yeah, there's a marketer. You have a marketer?
I don't have a marketer yet, no.
Right. So
Right.
you
So
see, right. So already class, you might discern that the other important aspect of this project is that it forces you to see the business side of the creative enterprise. There's a way in which, even though we know it's a creative enterprise, because we tend to come from a point of departure of creativity, we forget that for this thing to work, there are some business support elements, even in terms of human resource, that are necessary for this thing to be sustainable and successful. You get what I'm saying? As the young people say, ya dig? Make sense?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we got it.
That's right. That's right. And so that is not to cause doom and gloom, but where that will come in handy is when you have to do your financial planning. You have to budget for those things. You see?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's go by physical. Just as Jeremy did, can someone suggest their project and try? Let me hear you. Don't all rush at once. Why am I not hearing anybody?
Okay, I'll go.
Thank you. There's Malena.
Me, yeah, is that I have access to myself as the writer person.
No, no, not human being, physical.
Sorry. Well, I have a laptop.
Right. Okay, yes. Important. Trust me.
I have access to the internet to get additional resources if necessary. Music scoring programs to score examples to put in the book.
That is software or that is something physical and true.
Well, is a software, I guess.
That might go by intangible. That could go by intangible.
Okay.
Right. Anything else?
What I don't have access to physically is the like to put the ebook on external something so that people could have it in a tangible way.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. I'll accept that. Okay.
Dr. Tal,
Yes, please.
I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead.
Are we counting software as intangible? And
Yes.
if so, why? Because
it is. It is. Anything digital would be intangible because your intangibles also deal with your intellectual property and by extension your content. Those wouldn't be tangible.
the only reason I'm asking that is because, like, I feel like although you can't hold it,
Correct.
You can hold it. It's like if you put a song on the internet, you can purchase it and you
Janelle,
can use it. So I'm kind of confused as to,
Janelle, don't do
yeah.
that. Don't do that. This is business. Don't try to philosophize the thing. This is business. This is not trying to, conceptualize creativity. That's not that. It is an intangible, right? Software, by extension, intellectual property, content falls in the intangible domain. So the truth is, it is possible in the 21st century to have a business where they resource audit, they don't really have physical. When Amazon started, they probably had very few physical, but now they have their own delivery trucks, they have grocery now, and all kind of thing. But they were businesses, and Facebook would have been a similar way. You see, but now because these companies have expanded, they have headquarters, so they have physical structures. But their strength, their resource, when they do their resource audit, their strength really lies in the intangibles. You see?
Okay, so all digital stuff is
Yeah,
in.
what you call on the intangible. Yes, it's
Okay.
you can't physically hold it. Different to a CD, different to product, if you see what I'm saying. But even that, you could be discerning with that, because there was a time in the music industry when we were crossing over from CD to digital, that if I had to do a resource audit for a producer, he could have on the physical CDs. There's a word we used to, sound carriers is what we call that, right? Which is different to the music that he would have had on his content, his beats and whatnot, which would fall under intangible.
Hmm.
You see?
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Okay, somebody try financial for me using their project. Where all am I?
Right here.
Yes, try using the audit to do financial for your project.
Woo. All right. Like okay, for example,
You have
fee.
money for the project, or you have access to money for the project?
No, not really.
Okay, none at all.
None at, well, some, but not nothing to talk about really.
But you
If I
have
could,
money. So
something a
right.
little bit.
So you would say
Um, I would be able to get some investors, mostly family members.
right.
So I will need to be able to have lawyer fees to pay lawyers to get contracts done properly and different things as well, as you know. Because I mean, having the wherewithal, knowing about what are the law, what I would need, I would still need somebody who practices law to get these things done as fees. Um, wow. Insurance, I think, or
right. You have
I
it, or you have to get.
have to get.
Right.
Um, money to pay human resources for whatever things I might need to get done, in terms of
Wages for staff.
wages, right? Voice over, different everything, wages, all of those things.
Right.
Money to pay marketing people,
Right.
all of those things.
Okay.
I don't know if I cover anything else.
Not bad. Does anybody have a similar experience with their project in terms of they do not own, in terms of the financials being more than the own?
True, in a little bit.
Right. And I ask, and I especially ask this of the Alicias in the class. Does that daunt you? You feel
No,
as
it doesn't. No, it does not.
right. So my question is, when we reach this stage of the resource audit and we see that happen, what we telling ourselves? What going on there then?
We need to actually find a way to get access to what it is we don't have access to.
Right. Right. Once we clear on, right. Okay. Can we get someone else's? Right, Alicia, intangibles. Or either you or Janelle. So Janelle had asked a question about intangibles. What about intangibles now?
Whew. What will I? Definitely, at least for my project, um, my network is going to be of extreme importance in terms of me being able to get access to persons who, are willing to come on board with the project to
Yeah, I have them or not. Remember, we ain't talking about what. So, which side are we talking? Are you discussing own
I will
or
have
to, or
I
what?
I
Huh?
have access to some, but there will be others that I don't have access to in terms of seamstresses, designers too as well. Um,
Okay, just now. Pause. Now, take it
sorry,
forward.
I'm pulling the wrong thing.
That,
That's human. In terms,
that's
in
right.
terms of the intangible,
Mm-hmm.
I'm to confuse my own self there.
Yeah.
Um, my network,
Mm-hmm.
my goodwill.
Mm-hmm. But you have to articulate these
I
things.
have I can put those under what I have access to. My network, my goodwill. Um, what I don't have access to.
And the network is in with respect to what, and the goodwill is with respect to what? Because you see, because
The
they're
network, the
intangible,
network. Mm-hmm.
because they're intangible, you have to articulate what they
Exactly.
are, that you can be clear on how they are intangible and how you have access or own it. You see? Do you
This requires
understand
some deep, this requires some deeper thought.
that? Look how the others just roll that off their tongue.
Huh.
Hmm.
In, hmm.
Hmm.
In terms of the intangible, it
Mhm.
my network,
Mhm.
I have access to persons who will, but
I
I'm
listen,
confusing my own self.
Janelle,
Yeah, let me let
because
me try.
doubting yourself, but
And
get
and
some numerous examples for this one. Hillary, Janelle, anyone?
yeah, I could try this, Um, in terms of intangibles, I
Oh,
have
this
the
is Margaret.
I have the know-how.
Right.
I have access to a solid network.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to develop. I don't have like trademarks and patent
Right.
and that kind of stuff.
Right.
I also do have like goodwill because of like my network and whatnot. And I still have to develop my brand.
Right. You see that's
Yes.
right. Everybody understands that?
So far.
Tell me
Yes,
how,
miss.
Yep.
how that exercise. Let me just get some feedback from you in terms of going through that. What were some of the thoughts that came to mind as we're going through it there with respect to your own specific ventures?
It helped me to understand in more detail the things that weren't on my radar in the immediate in terms of with regards to the human, with regards to what I wasn't thinking of any moment, like a lawyer and accountant. I'm like, oh, I didn't, it just didn't occur to me in that moment. But only when we went through it, I'm like, right. So it was a way to help me flesh out what I may need that I don't have access to, that may not have been on my radar. So it's a way to help me really see what I need, what I have, and what I don't have. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Anybody else? This is actually one of my favorite tools. I call this the reality check. Anybody else?
Well, is that
My
reality check
thoughts,
for
my
me?
thoughts, is really a reality check. I
Mm-hmm.
really felt, wow, this is
There's
a
so much
lot.
yet to have to.
There's an adjective I was gonna go before, but there's a lot. This is a wow. I didn't think of all of these things. So it's
Mm-hmm.
good.
Exactly in the same boat
So,
here.
any, sorry, go ahead.
Well, for me, I say, well, okay, like some intangible things I may have and have the experience in the field. So,
Mhm.
but human resource, I may have like one person that I already target. But I said things. I was
Mhm.
like, wait, I got
Mhm.
much yet to think about still. You
Right,
understand? You're just touching the surface.
right. Does anybody feel relieved though, even though it was an eye opener?
Yeah, yeah, it was a big help
Yeah.
Right,
because yeah,
right. And why do you feel relieved? And this is, I'm not just making small talk. This is important as a creative entrepreneur. Your mind has to be right. It has to be healthy. To be able to embark on what you want to do, what you're thinking of doing. Because as I said, in this course, you're not just being trained to do a document and get your grade and graduate and write out, but it's really to be that it's either that you do this as close as you possibly can or you do something like it. That's the idea of ACAM. So the mind has to be right. So I asked the question, you say, you have a sense of relief. Anyone? And why is that?
I do. And it's forced me to, not really forced, I should say, but it's guided my thinking and planning in a more concentrated direction now, for
Yeah, and
sure.
it's early in the game, isn't it?
Yep.
yeah.
The place at which people would traditionally have these contemplations is when they're not going to do budget. They may go by an accountant to do what Miss Joseph is teaching you. And then to realize they've come on all this journey to now reach a place to realize, wait, no, but like I really can't do this thing because I didn't think of all these things. And this is what daunts creative people sometimes, you see, because it may be a very good idea as we know, and it sounded real exciting. And you know how we as creative people like to say, that's a bad one, that bad boy. And I mean, I have seen this a lot, particularly in the Caribbean, in music especially, because people in the music industry, they're always very quickly create. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in some of the other sectors, the other 37 sectors that we have across the Caribbean. But I think because music is one of the oldest and there's a lot more infrastructure in place for music, I see it happen there a lot. And it's when someone like myself now have to come inside the thing now to advise, and I start answering his like, but wait now, but doc, I ain't studied that. And what it does sometimes is that it can be a very daunting proposition because the stage at which the things are now being contemplated is really late down in the game, so to speak. Okay? So I'm glad that you recognize, you are aware of yourselves in terms of what the exercise can do, what this particular exercise can do beyond its purpose in terms of the documentation that you are being asked to produce. So is everybody comfortable with this?
Yes, I have a
Yes.
question as well though.
Go ahead, please.
Yes.
What is the difference therefore with the cows analysis and the SWOT analysis? Like because they're both asking for the same thing. So is it that it can be used interchangeably?
Yes, they can. A cause and a SWOT is basically the same thing. Like
Okay.
how pepper and a pestle is basically the same thing. Some people
A what on a pestle?
pestle and slept. The
Oh,
difference with
I've never
the
heard that.
pestle is that the pestle has an extra E in it for environment. If it is that you're dealing with experiences, cultural experiences like festivals and events that are obviously affected by the natural environment, you know,
Okay.
like climate and weather and those kinds of things,
Okay.
right?
All right. Thanks. I'm just clarifying In
But-
case you want something specific, geared specifically for like, you know, one
Right.
part.
Yeah, but a SWOT and a
Cow.
cows is basically the same thing.
Excuse me at all.
Yes.
So if you, in terms of financial things you do not have access to, so if you're applying to bodies like Ministry of Culture or Tourism for funding, would you put it there only if you had gained access to it, or if you're considering?
Only if you gain access to it.
Okay.
If it is that you put it there and you've not gained access to it, what have you done then? Anybody? If you go put it, but you've not gotten it. Let's say you're building the plan and you ain't get it, you're thinking of doing it, but you ain't have it, but you put it there. What happens then?
Then you're going to mislead your own self in terms of what resources you do have and what you don't have access to.
And if
That's one. And what else? What else are you going to do?
Wouldn't it affect your budget directly? Because now you have to get it.
Correct. Because you could use your resource audit, which I think you're realizing now from what I've said. You could use your resource audit to build your budget. You realize that? You can use your resource audit to help you to build your financial statements. So if you go put it there, but the point is you've not gotten it, it's a false kind of security you're setting up there. And remember now, we are doing these documents that are supposed to be shared with investors, with potential investors, not so? So then we would be telling them that we have received partnerships that we've not. You see? So that could be a dangerous proposition for us, because it means therefore that we are discussing the project in a context that is not the reality at all, you know. And as we know, sometimes these things may not actually come into fruition, even if we are promised certain things. Agreed?
Agreed.
Right. Okay, great. So let's take a look now at any other questions or comments before we go on? We're all good with that? All right, great. So allow me to thank you. Was it who was sharing with me, Jeremy or Joshua? Joshua, thanks very much, Joshua.
No
And
problem.
let's just put back up the lecture now. Which one to give some trouble? I don't know why. Okay, give me 1 minute, class. Some reason you want to cooperate.
Teams is life.
Yes, I'm telling you, you know. All right, I have it though. I'm learning its eccentricity, so it can't trick me like before. Learning its eccentricities. It hasn't come up as yet. Is it there or not yet?
Not yet.
All right, we're gonna. I'm opening it, but it's not. Okay. Right. Now it's coming up. Crazy. It's very centric. Right. So what we want to do now that we would have a sense of ourselves now, not just strategically, but now in terms of our kitchen list, as we say, our shopping list, we would now want look and do that assessment of the environment in which we are operating. And to me, there's this old saying, to thine own self the true one. We hear people talk things about best to know yourself, and it's funny to me in strategic assessment, it's also important because you already doing your strategic intent, then you would have conducted your resource audit, and now you are looking outwardly to scan that environmental assessment. And I feel being equipped with those first two elements, you are in a better position. Why is it going like that? You are in a trying to get it to go back. You are in a better position to analyze your external environment. In other words, you're not just analyzing it in terms of what you're seeing, right? In front of you, but you are analyzing it not just in terms of what you're seeing, but knowing what is your strategic intent and what you have at your disposal. Okay, so let us take a look now at what that means now in terms of what it is and how we are to go about doing it. So it's important, first of all, that we have a sense of the nature of the environment in which we operate from a broad standpoint. And the reason for that is then you will know the kind of detailed analysis that you should be engaging in where strategy is concerned. Okay? Sometimes people misread the environment in which they operate, and they end up making simplistic kinds of determinations or strategic determinations that when they don't get much bang for their buck, they kind of wondering, but why this didn't work out better, or how it is that I couldn't get more from this. And it's because they would have misread their environment. That's what we call it. Okay? It can also happen in the other way, where the environment isn't as complex as they think it is. And it may not be the entire environment being complex, but it might be the competitive side of the environment is. And so the strategies being devised are more targeted at the general environment as opposed to giving more attention to the marketing and branding, which of course would more directly address the competitive issues that may be confronting the venture. Of course, by saying that, one may see that that also affects your budget, your finances. Because if you oversimplify it, it means that you may overlook, therefore, budgeting for branding or budgeting for a marketing strategy, especially if you're doing something like a feasibility plan. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? What I would
Yeah.
say, though, great. What I would say, though, which is point number two, and I believe we all know this because we're all practitioners, creative workers, variously in this industry for many years, is that it is uncertain. And we know with COVID, in an ironic kind of way, it has not necessarily heightened uncertainty. But what it has done is it has put us, to my mind, at a plateau where we know that we are looking for strategies to pivot. I think that we in the arts and culture perhaps are in an enviable position because we were always disenfranchised. We were always operating in a context of uncertainty because of the way in which the arts and culture would be treated as industry in the region. So in this particular context now, it's like, okay, well, let's see, because we already know we're in an uncertain environment. All right, maybe there are some advantages that I can take that would allow me to push through, even though this is a pandemic. And so the point of number two is for us as creative enterprises, it isn't just to acknowledge that it is an uncertain environment and that it makes it difficult sometimes to map out future impacts, but that we should be looking to see where opportunities may lie in some of the most unlikely places. The creative entrepreneur has to have his or her antenna up for that because of the fact that we have always operated in an uncertain environment. It's like it's uncertain, then since it's uncertain, a rabbit could come out of a hat. It don't have to mean that it's uncertain and there's always a hole in the bottom of the hat. Does everybody understand the analogy I'm making? So uncertainty does not always have to be to our disadvantage then. If we are cognizant of it being that way, it means that we should be on the lookout for where opportunities may pop up unexpectedly because of the nature of the business that we're in. Comments, feedback on that, please. Do you understand the point I'm making there? Anyone? Everybody gone home?
No, we're here.
Right? Does that make sense? Everybody understands what I'm saying there?
Kind
Or
of.
that one was heavy. That one was way up there.
Yeah, just feel a little wheel and come again. I don't know. I'm probably need to kusume. I don't know.
Okay, so it's like this, basically. We operate in an uncertain environment. But we are schooled to think that uncertainty is always a negative thing. Not so? When you hear uncertain, you always think of the boogeyman around the corner. Not so?
Yeah, a little jump. Yeah.
Right. But the fact of the matter is, uncertainty also means a surprise. Surprise could be a pleasant surprise. All surprises are not bad surprises. And so, what I'm saying is, if we enter into our environmental scan, recognizing the word uncertainty in its entirety, we wouldn't only be scanning for uncertainty as a negative, but we will be on the lookout for things that may actually be opportunity. So, for example, let us take the COVID. Nobody expected COVID to come. But COVID does present opportunities for some aspects of the creative industries, particularly if it is that you can use digitization. So whilst on the one hand, we may be working, but we're not earning, as one of my colleagues said today in the conference, there is the opportunity through digitalization to up your game in ways that you might not have before because we could have physically met and we would have engaged physically where certain things are concerned in the creative industries. And this relates to people in the music. For example, you hear a lot of artists who trying to pivot that they are now looking at ways to monetize in a more serious way digitally, whereas before they never paid attention to it because of course they were earning via performance, live performance for the most part. Now
But
you
at
can
least hustle.
that's well, no, I don't like to say that. It's not a
No,
hustle.
I thought they were earning via doing the circuit hustle.
Well,
Most
I disagree with that. I just call it the gig economy. The word hustle sometimes has a strange connotation, but the fact is you recognize now that you could get into other revenue streams now, but that happened because of COVID, you see? So this is what I mean when I talk about an environment. We acknowledge point number 2 that the environment is uncertain, but I am asking you all as emerging creative entrepreneurs that don't just see that statement to imply or hint at uncertainty being a negative thing. Like if it's always the jumbie waiting around the bend for you, but rather that within there is uncertainty in terms of there being opportunities that you may be able to take advantage of. All right, everybody's better now, clear on that?
yes, miss.
Right. Okay. And my point 3 I had made already about oversimplification. All right, so as usual, I like to tell you all why, but I believe we've talked about this in some measure as we would have spoken in general about analyzing the environment. Most certainly, if you do your scanning external environment, you could be more proactive. You could be a lot more aware of what's going on in the environment. You will be able to discern for yourself the level and degree of uncertainty that exists out there in the environment where your creative venture is concerned, so that it's not to your disadvantage for sure. Doing it is going to help to point out even more some of the other things you should be focusing on with respect to your budget. So it's a reality check. It's like the part two or the flip side of the first reality check that you would have engaged in terms of your resource audit. So this is a tool that we use to scan the environment. This is a simple one. You would have heard me mention PESTLE. I believe I gave you the worksheet for PESTLE. But it was originally known as SLEPT, the SLEPT analysis. Olimal, you remember this?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Here you go. Right? And the SLEPT analysis is really a tool where we use this as an acronym to say that these are the key factors that exist in any environment, regardless of whether you're in the business of manufacturing nails or you are in the business of creating content. This SLEPT analysis is used across many industries. I have found it particularly especially useful for us because of the same point we were just making there about the uncertainty of our environment. And the reason I say that is because what this exercise gets you to do is to first identify what factors are impacting according to these categories, whether they are positive or negative. Okay? So your socio-cultural factors refer to anything to do with society, to do with culture, to do with social norms, cultural behavior. So for example, people right now, if you had to identify a sociocultural factor that impacts on the creative industry ecosystem now, people are spending more time online, looking at free content, whether it's in a IG live or a Zoom concert, or I believe FB has stopped it now. Facebook not allowing for it now. Is that true? I know they were saying they won't, or they've not bothered to do that. I think I saw something saying Facebook will stop you from having live concerts free.
Not sure, can't say.
Right.
I didn't even know that.
I think I saw that or read that or something. But anyway.
Stars. So
Sorry?
they have something called stars. They have something called stars now. So like, if somebody's doing a live performance, you could actually give stars to the person.
Okay.
But in order to get the stars, you have to purchase it. So that's how the money comes in.
Oh, so who make any money? Facebook or you? The artist?
I guess it'll be between Facebook and the person. I don't know.
That
Because
sounded
for
shaky.
test concerts, I remember seeing it. Like you could give stars to the person, and when I clicked it, you had to actually buy the stars in order to give it.
Gosh. Lord, that
I'm
sounded
too sure who got money out of it.
How much were the stars though?
I don't know. And from the time I saw it, I just came out. I was like, oh, this is what it is. Okay, bye.
Wow.
But I mean, we can find out if we just research it, I guess.
Okay. Yeah,
What's the
that's
cost of a piece?
I must look that up. Okay. So that the idea of sociocultural factor, though, as I was saying, is anything to do with social norms, social behavior, cultural norms, cultural behavior. Legal factors, anything to do with regulation, the law. So any regulation, whether it's law of the land, industry norm, industry regulations that can impact on your venture. Economic and marketing factors. So economic in terms of people's spending power, people's purchasing preference, market preferences, demographics, all of that would fall under the E. Political, that is not just politics that in terms of governmental interest or influence, but also politics that may happen in the industry. We know that in the creative industries, we do have industry politics. And then last but not least, technological, which of course would encompass anything to do with digitalization, um, anything to do with technology in terms of hardware, not just in terms of digital, but even physical resources that are of a technical or technological nature, that would fall there. Right? Okay. So does everybody understand how this SLEP works? So if we, okay, let's do the same thing again. Joshua, kindly do the honors and pull up the SLEP worksheet.
Sure. It'll be pastel in this case, right?
Sorry?
It'll be pastel in this case.
Yes, there will be pestle in this case, correct. Right. So, as I said before, the extra E, just scroll down one moment for me, please, so that I can show that one. The extra E refers to environmental, and that is if there are things in the natural environment that would affect your business and your venture, and that would relate particularly to those ventures that may be of a experience orientation, that may be cultural experiences or events. So if it is that you don't have that, you would use the matrix and do select. But if that is applicable, you would do pestle. Can you scroll back up, please? So for those who've not used theirs, so let's give it a shot. Can somebody suggest their project, their venture, and identify maybe one or two political factors? And remember, political factors can be industry politics or governance.
Okay, I can think of one for cosplay story camp. I can think of the limited numbers for gatherings as mandated by the government. I think that could be political. That can result in less numbers for children being able to gather in the actual physical camp space. So
Right.
because of that political decision in mandating less numbers for gatherings, it can directly impact how many children can physically gather at the camp.
Correct. Well done. Great, great. And if you notice the way in which it was explained, the way in which Jeremy explained it, you are clear not only about the factor, but you're clear about how the factor is impacting on your venture. So it's important that you give all of that. You don't just identify the factor and say the public health ordinance COVID-19 no gathering, but you explain what the factor is and you also say how the factor impacts. Right. Can somebody do economic with this? I'm hearing somebody.
I just also wanted to add that probably part of mine would be the laws that exist on nudity and how you circumvent that for possible performances and whatnot.
Yes.
And also I found that in the past, well, I don't know how it is now, but I found that in the past, even getting a specific, like getting to rent Queen's Hall has been a kind of political fight depending on who you are, what your name is, and who you know on the board to get to book the space. Because a lot of times they say it's unavailable, or they say like it's not available for how much, like about for the rest of the year. But somebody would come after and they know somebody, so that kind of thing I think is also
right. Yes, very good examples. Correct. Economic. Someone can use their project and do economic, please. Don't all rush at once. For everybody. Well, if you don't think, I will skip and move on. Because the way this works is that if you try for yourself, you will see the merit in it. Hillary, where's Hillary?
Right here.
You want to try it for economic? What's an economic factor that may impact on your could be economic or marketing? Economic slash marketing.
Let's see.
Economic slash marketing. I give it Hillary a chance. I give it a chance to think. Let me see what I could go by while you.
Come back on that one.
Right, I'm coming back to you now. Where is Nivedita? Jira have
Hi. Good night. Dr. Toll, would let's say if your app had to be purchased, so like the purchasing options, would that be an economic consideration?
purchasing options in relation to what? You have to explain it better. I'm not
For for the app that I'm trying to create, the purchasing options that you'd offer your customers, would that go under economic?
No.
That's technological.
Your select and pestle factors are external to your business, so you have no control over them.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Tell,
I can think I could add to. Sorry.
Can I try?
Yeah, sure.
I think economic will deal with the economical climate of the country due to the COVID, all this stuff happening economically now with so many people. And I think as well as a teacher or as anybody trying to purchase something like what Nevelita is trying to sell, it might not be cost effective for people because right now the way the economics now, people may not be able to afford it.
Right.
So they may have to.
A lack of disposable income, in other words.
That's right. Thank you very much for that, Oliman Nivedita. You see, that is a perfect example of what I was just about to explain. To say that the way in which you said it at first, that is like an internal factor, you see? But the same point you make, the way in which Oliman turned it around, she made it a select factor. Do you see? Because she looked at it from the outside in terms of what may be going on outside that could impact on people being able to purchase your app. Do you understand, Nivedita? But if you say starting how you have, then that becomes now a resource audit factor. That becomes an internal issue. You see?
Yeah, I get it.
Right. Lovely. Somebody else was going to say something. Alimal was going to speak. I believe, Janelle, were you going to say something?
No, I was just agreeing with Olemal and saying like a lack of disposable income.
Right. So we have now sociocultural. So can somebody use their venture, their concept for socioculture? What's a sociocultural factor that can impact? And this tends to be one of the more extensive factor categories because of course we operate in the realm of socioculture. So there's always, a lot to be said in terms of factors coming out of the wider sociocultural environment that are likely to impact on our creative entrepreneurial ventures. Anyone can give us an example of one using their business?
I would venture to say that the attitudes that because Trinidad is such a conservative place and it is so driven by like church and the attitudes that are adopted there wholesale, I think that might be something to consider in terms of who I am marketing to and who my potential customers can be, and in terms of wanting to even consider that, oh my God, pleasure is something I can have.
That is correct.
Without going to hell.
Yeah. Yes, correct. Anybody else wants to give that a try or go by technological?
I feel like mine may end up being technological, but I'll say it anyway. Um, well, I mean, go work backwards. Technological, we mean talking about like innovation and development and advancement. Okay,
Correct.
well, like, maybe sociocultural then in terms of access to devices, because mine is also an app.
Yes.
And the target age range I'm looking at, they of themselves may not have something, a device of their own that they can call theirs. They might have to use mommy or daddy's.
Right.
So
Right.
that age distribution or that age factor.
Right. That could go either
So
sociocultural or technological, depending on how you work it, how you state it. It might be a two-part.
right.
Because the access to devices does have a sociocultural implication, but we know for sure it definitely has a technological implication because that's a digital divide issue, which
For
is
sure.
technological. Right, great, that's good. All right, legal regulatory, that should be easy for everybody. Since it's so easy, I will do that one. So whatever the copyright laws, intellectual property laws that exist, and you would have to state now whether that's working for you or against you. And for most of what the only person who probably could write it and it be stated as an opportunity in a sense is Jiron in terms of his being music and there's a collective agency that covers music. But for what most of the rest of you are doing, there are no collective agencies in Trinidad and Tobago that cover or represent the content that you all are buttressing through your particular ventures. You see, so legal and regulatory should allow you to talk about issues to do with intellectual property laws, trade laws, competition laws, if it's relevant, OSH, if it's relevant, um, industrial laws, so that legal and then those are just the ones to do with national governance. But if there are regulations within the industry, not the politics now, but regulations, those should also be noted, right? And then last but not least, as I said, environmental, if it's an event you're doing, certainly looking like, so for example, when we had 9/11, at the time looking at the creative industries, especially the carnivals, the major environmental factor there used to be the fact of what happened on account of 9/11 and people not wanting to travel. And there was also, of course, in terms of us being in a region where it's very intense in terms of a hurricane season, that affects when you may choose to do something as an event. Now, in these times where we're not even gathering, the question is, so that environmental, if you look at COVID as a health issue, it could also sit there squarely as an impacting issue coming out of the environment, which you have no control over. So does everybody understand how we utilize the PESTLE tool?
For
Yes.
now.
Yes, miss. Yep.
And the point about it is that you will note that factors may either be positive or negative. At this stage, you are just noting them down, right? So you use your worksheets, which, as I said, just like your resource audit, you can clean it up and that can be in your document as part of your plan. You just know what the issues are. There will come a point in time through your cause analysis grid or your SWOT grid, whichever one you're using, where you'll be able to separate positives from negatives, as you will soon see. Okay, thank you again, Joshua. Let me upload once more the
Sure.
lecture. Right. And so the last piece of environmental assessment that you would want to engage in is to zero in on competition. And this particular tool is especially important for those who are doing feasibility and those who are doing the strategic marketing plan. I'm not saying that those who are doing business plan shouldn't use it, but it is even more critical for those who are doing feasibility. The competitive analysis is supposed to be able to highlight for you not just competitors in terms of something like a product competing with your product or service, but also competitors in terms elements out there operating in the external environment that do operate, do position themselves as some kind of competition. And this is Porter's theory, a brilliant theory in my mind, which he argues and says that this is not the only kind of competition that we have.
Yeah. But this is not, but yeah.
Hello?
Yes, I was saying, Alimal, your mic.
Sorry. Sorry.
Porter argues that it isn't just the rivalry among your existing competitors that you have to be concerned about as competition, but also that, excuse me, these other four forces, as he calls them, can also act as competition. And that's why he calls it the five forces analysis. And what you are supposed to do as a creative entrepreneur in scanning your environment is to try to discern to the extent to which these five forces are also impacting on your venture or can impact on your venture. The extent to which they do and how many of them do, and identify. So you would recreate the diagram. There's no worksheet for this per se, but you use the model excuse me, as a guide. So one of the things that can act as competition is if there are low barriers to entry. So meaning to say, when you look at your project, can different people come in there? So if I remember, if we use Nivedita's initial project idea as one, this is one of the reasons why you switch. Not so, Nivedita?
Yeah.
Because it would seem as though, excuse me, it was easy for others to enter the market quite easily and even drown you out, depending on who they are and what backing they were getting. So
Yeah,
the threat of the new entrants can act as a serious competitive force because you might be hot today but not tomorrow because of that. Well, we know about competitive rivalry, which is this bargaining power of suppliers. So whatever it is you're doing, so this is up this is like Alicia and who else needs seamstresses? This is Joshua.
Cosplay, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Jeremy cosplay, right? So does your supplier have power over you in terms of what you all will be offering, right? And on the other hand now, we should be like Alimal and Nivedita and Milena, do your customers have power over you to decide that they're not going to use what you're offering and go to somebody else who's doing something similar or different, and or they feel they don't need it, right? And then the threat of substitution. This falls in a sense in Janelle's garden. Your thing is so unique and it raises eyebrows that somebody decides, well, I'm gonna do that too. It's like the modern day Susu almost, right? Because it was so unique and so whoo, you ended up then with it quickly being uh an enterprise, for want of a better term, where it was replicated very quickly. And so now the market is flooded with it. Does everybody understand how five forces works? So what you're doing is, yeah, so what you're doing is you're using these examples that help to guide you to explain each one. And if you Google Porter's five forces analysis, there are many examples online showing you how the model is applied. And there are one or two in the creative industry, so you may find it useful. It will certainly spark your ideas, your mind, in terms of what may be applicable to your particular venture, right? And if you can replicate it, you replicate it like this and you note it, or if you can't, you just, of course, have the subheadings and you say what are the factors to do with threat of new entry that impact on your venture, that create a competitive force for your venture. And then you do the same thing with competitive rivalry, the same thing with bargaining power suppliers, threat of substitutes, bargaining power of buyers. Everybody understands how we do that?
Yes, miss.
Any
Yeah.
questions about that from anyone? Right. Okay. So when we have done the slept and the pest, sorry, the slept or pestle and the 5 forces, and we've done the resource audit, we are now in a position now to do our cows. And basically the way in which it works is that the things that are derived from your resource audit that would have been positives are your strengths. The things that would have been derived from your SLEP or PESTLE analysis that are positives are your opportunities. And then, of course, the things that are derived from your resource audit and your PESTLE slash SLEP that were negative, those are considered your threats and your weaknesses. So if we put up the diagram, the grid of the cows, and I suppose we can do that now that you can take a look at it. Joshua, could you do me the honors, please? Right, if you scroll down, this is my diagram, how I construct it. I find this relatively easy. So again, one of the ways in which you ensure that you don't mix up factors that come from your resource audit and your PESTLE.
Excuse me, Miss.
Yes?
I'm not seeing anything. I don't know if it's me alone.
Well, I'm seeing it.
Maybe you alone, Janelle.
Okay, I'm going out and coming in.
Are you seeing it now?
I'm not seeing anything. I'll go out and come back in.
Okay. Okay. Right? So I was saying that the way in which you ensure that you are doing your cows correctly, you do a kind of check back, is to ensure that everything to do with your slap slash pestle are things happening on the outside of you and your venture. You have no control over those. And things to do with your business on the inside, as we call them, the internalities, those are the things that you have control over. Those are the factors that you're pulling from the resource audit. So all of the factors that you list, all of the elements that you list in the resource audit, you basically put them back here. And just like the other two worksheets, you replicate this as many times as you want. You don't have challenges and opportunities coming, stretching all down the page, and then weaknesses and strengths on the next page. You keep the matrix together. So if you need 5 pages of matrix to do your cows or your SWOT, so be it. Because it is expected that you will be thorough since you would have engaged in the resource audit exercise and that you would have done the SLEP exercise as well as the 5 forces exercise. So if you've done those things, it should not be a case where this is very scanty, like you only need 1 page of this. Then something definitely is wrong. Does everybody understand that?
Does it tell the 5 forces is to assess both external and internal factors?
No, if you look back at the 5 forces, if you look back at the 5 forces, you will see that that relates to competitive forces out there in the environment. In other words, it's like if it takes a snapshot now of a particular aspect of the external environment, and that is to do with competition. So everything to do with the 5 forces would fall under the external environment, because all that is going on in the external market: threat of substitution, rivalry, power of buyer, power of supply. These are all operating outside of your business, not so?
Right.
Right. Threat of entry, they could get into your market quickly, right? So like I say, when you do that particular template, it's very useful feeding into your your cows analysis. And then if you've done it at this stage and you're doing either a feasibility study or you're doing a strategic marketing plan, you just put it back lower down in the document, because you'll need it when you do your marketing assessment as well. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes. Right? Any other questions? Okay. I think this is a good place to stop today. I believe we've covered the necessary ground. We've had our 2 toolkit lectures, and I believe that this puts us in a nice position now to do our proposal, our 5-page proposal. And of course, you will go back to these recordings and to the lecture, the PowerPoint itself, for when you are required to submit your first draft, or whatever is the early part, the inception report, I believe it's called, which of course will be asked of you somewhere early on in the second semester, somewhere between January and February. But I think what would have been useful about this is that it gives the clarity within your mind at this time, as you now begin to dig deeper now into the project concepts, the ventures that you have in mind, and you get full scale into planning. You are armed with the tools that you need, and you should be now in a position now to plan in a more informed way. Next week when you come, yes?
I just have one question. I'm not sure I'm clear. Okay, so the PESTLE analysis speaks to the challenges and opportunities.
Yes.
The resource audit speaks to the strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
And the competitive, so that gives you the whole SWOT analysis, right? The cause analysis. But the competitive analysis is totally separate and apart from all of this.
The competitive analysis can also be used to enhance the O and T, or the C and O of your cows or SWOT analysis. Okay? Because competitor analysis zeroes in on the competitive sub-environment then.
So that the 5 forces kind of zeroes in on the external forces that
the external forces that
to your competitors.
Competitor, yes, to do with competition, because it argues that competition isn't just an actual competitor who may be selling a rival product or service, but what he argues is that there are forces out there that we just overlook that actually act like competition. That's what he's arguing. You see?
Okay, thank you very much.
Use those factors when you have arrived at them and incorporate and plug them into your cows as well. You see? But I'm also saying for those who are doing feasibility study, who are doing strategic marketing plan, that cows analysis will also become relevant to when you get into the section where you are required to do marketing assessment or market assessment. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, class, any other questions? Right. So as I said, I think this is a good place we can stop. We can pause for a cause. I think this was a very engaging class today. I do hope that this was useful. And I do hope that everyone is comfortable with what we've discussed, that you have greater clarity, you have renewed vigor for your project ideas. Of course, I would expect that you would work the worksheets. I would happily look at the worksheets next week. We can throw them up as we do sometimes on the screen and take a look at what we've come up with so we're sure that we're on the right track. Next week when we come, we will look at our proposal in terms of the instructions in our course guide and what is expected of us to be sure that we're all on the same page, that we can be ready for our deadline. I am thinking that I will ask Ms. Joseph to do that guest lecture for you on financial planning to do with your projects next semester and allow for you now to focus, excuse me, in greater detail on building your proposal. All right, and what they may mean then is that we will more than likely finish our classes sooner than later for this semester.
Sounds good.
Yes, I think so too. All right, so that's it for this evening class. Thank you all.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.